Welcome to SAMCAST, a production of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. I have a couple special guests today. First, my name is David Trahan. I'm the Executive Director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. I have two special guests, and we're going to be talking turkey. Bob Humphrey, a great outdoor writer. He's a SAM board member, avid turkey hunter, has been doing it for a long time in both Massachusetts and Maine. And Kevin Antonovitch, I hope I got that right.
You got it right, Dave.
All right. I'm going to let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his experience, but he's an avid turkey hunter as well. Hey, last night, heard peepers for the first time, and when I took a walk, I see a couple of frogs on the road, so turkey season's coming, guys. So, Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, David. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I've been a self-taught turkey hunter for about 25 years or so. Read Bob's book, was one of the things that helped me out in the beginning. And I've been at it. I've been a member of the NWTF. I'm a Silver Life member and held different positions through the NWTF. And we're starting a new chapter up here, local chapter, Northern Pine Limb Hangers. There was 9 chapters at one point. Now we're down to 2. With ours, it's going to be 2. So we're looking for people that are interested as well. I've been called a turkey addict before. My name's Kevin. I'm a turkey addict. I love turkey hunting, and I wasn't born a turkey hunter. I was born and bred a deer hunter, but then I kind of switched over, and here I am. And I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Bob, will you tell us a little bit about your history as well with turkeys?
Yeah, it's somewhat similar to Kevin's. If you're as old as I am and you started turkey hunting in New England, in most cases it was the first time that anyone had hunted in that particular state. So we had to be self-taught. There were no mentors up here. From there, I caught the bug. I went crazy. Since then I've hunted 25 states. I've had a couple archery records in Massachusetts and Maine, state records with the National Wild Turkey Federation's official records, written a couple books, a few articles. I served on the Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Wild Turkey Working Group when we prepared the last 10-year management plan for turkeys in the state. I've assisted with trap and transfer programs, a research project 3 years ago in coordination with IFW in the state of Maine, and a bunch of other things.
Sure. So, I was on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee when a lot of the turkey program started, and let's talk a little bit about the introduction. I remember a lot of critics saying, well, turkeys won't make it in Maine, it's too cold, there's too much snow. There's turkeys everywhere. I've been in North Maine woods and seen wild turkeys, and I think it's probably one of the most successful introduction programs in the country. Talk just briefly about that, and we can get into some other subjects, but your thoughts on the reintroduction of turkeys into Maine?
Yeah, I mean, nationwide, I would say it's one of the premier conservation success stories, and maybe give us a national perspective.
I would agree. It's unfortunately now it's kind of when we started out, the trap and transfer was a great benefit to us up here, as that's where we got our turkeys from, and it's moving on significantly, and we like where it's going, and nationally there's a little bit of a decline, but I think we're back there, and we're in the beginning stages of it.
Yeah, I got to see, not the very first ones, but here in Maine, I did participate in some trap and transfer. Maine, like a number of states throughout the country, really, when they first started the program, they would pen raise turkeys and release them into the wild, and all of those programs failed. And they got to the point where they said, well, this isn't going to work. There's nothing we can do. And then somebody came up with the idea, well, let's trap wild turkeys in the wild and move them from one place to another. And then it grew slowly, and then it took off. Our birds, the first states in the Northeast were New York and Pennsylvania, and then eventually the New York birds were brought over to Vermont, and then from Vermont to New Hampshire and Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. And most of this work took place in the 70s. up into the 80s. We were still mostly relocating birds within states by the 80s. And I remember it was probably early 90s. I was over at the Gray office of IF&W one day, and they said, we're going to sacrifice some turkeys today. We're going to bring them up to Bethel and release them because they didn't think that there was any way that they would live that far north. Well, look at where we are now. Just to show some numbers too about how successful this program has been. In 1998, Maine's turkey population was estimated at around 8,000. I think last year hunters
70.
killed 6,000 birds,
Roughly, yeah.
and it was estimated at what?
Population's estimated around 70,000 now.
70,000. So almost a 10 times increase.
But that population really depends on predation. I think I did this analysis for the legislature once. Actually, I was responsible, brought in legislation to expand the fall turkey season for this reason. The hens will lay 12, 15 eggs and raise those little ones. So what happens in the summertime, the population explodes when you calculate the number of birds on the landscape. A lot of those, get predated on and die during the summer, but the population just blows up.
The great thing, they'll have 12 or 15 in a clutch, but they may not raise all those to fruition, to an adult bird. There's a lot of, I think part of the, and Bob, I don't know what your opinion is on it, but a lot of the predation now is because there's not a lot of trapping.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's right,
And-
that's right.
And so
Agreed.
a turkey, it's always been said that a turkey is fed on, or somebody's trying to kill it its whole life.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that's true from the egg all the way up to,
Well, we'll get back to what you just said, because I think it's important for the people that be listening to this to understand that bringing the turkey in changed the dynamic across the landscape. Other wildlife benefited from turkeys coming here. I'll get to that in a minute. But one of the biggest criticisms I hear, maybe you guys can speak to it, is why in the world don't they start the season a little different so that it's easier to bring the tom turkeys in? Can you guys speak to why they have the season set up the way they do in the springtime?
Yeah, most states set their turkey season so that by the time hunters are in the woods, most of the hens have mated and at least started a clutch. When a hen mates, she'll go in, she'll lay an egg, and then she'll leave it for a day, go back and lay another egg, and then about midway through she may stay longer, an hour longer, 2 hours longer, and then once the clutch is complete, she'll stay there. Well, early, that's a very important period for hen turkeys, early in the egg laying process. If they get disturbed, they'll abandon the egg, and maybe they'll start another nest, maybe they won't. So they want to keep the numbers of hunters down. Also, I think, why it's supposed to be sporting.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's not going to make a huge difference success-wise, so my vote is keep it the way it is.
I would tend to agree with you. There was a lot of discussion when they changed the hunting seasons. We used to end at noontime, and then we went to all-day hunting. The theory behind the noontime quitting time was that there were less hunters in the woods, so the hens could go about doing their own business. They did studies that proved that really wasn't the case. It really didn't bother the hens as much. But starting it earlier, I don't know if that would be a significant impact. One of the good things, or one of the draws for Maine turkey hunting, is that we have one of the later seasons. And that draws a lot of people, a lot of guys that are doing like world slams or grand slams, which is getting a different species. They'll travel to Maine last, and because we have such a long season.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to circle back real quick to the predation issue. I've been in the woods my whole life, since I can remember. Since I was a kid, my mom and dad had put a leash on me to keep me from going hunting. Well, even when I was too young to go, fishing the same way. When I was a kid, it was rare to see a bobcat. Even rarer to see a coyote chasing a turkey in the springtime. I see in the last year, I've seen 4 separate incidents with bobcats really close to turkeys or chasing turkeys. And everybody I talk to says the same thing, especially in southern Maine. We have bobcats everywhere now, and I think that can be attributed to turkeys on the landscape, giving them a real food source. The same with the coyotes. A lot of people out turkey hunting will tell me stories about coyotes tackling their turkey decoys and whatnot. Are you seeing the same thing as I'm seeing?
My opinion would be that turkeys can fly,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's not a whole lot. The bobcat's probably the closest predator that could catch them. Coyotes don't get a lot of them.
Yeah.
They may get the young
Yeah.
before they can fly.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah.
the little
But
ones.
for a coyote to get a mature bird, because they'll just take flight, and that's one of the amazing things with those animals. They're so big,
Yeah.
but they can take off.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit about the fall season now. I am not really a spring turkey hunter. I have so many things I like to do in the springtime. Fishing is one of them. In the fall, I love to turkey hunt. And what I do is I stalk them much like deer. I'll try to pattern turkeys. I'll try to sneak up on them and get a shot at them. One of my favorite ways to hunt is in a cornfield and to hear them and try to get ahead of them and whatnot. So we all have our different ways of hunting turkey, but let's talk about how many you can shoot in the fall now. You can take a lot of birds, 5 I believe.
5, yeah.
And,
5 of either sex.
yeah, of either
Depending on
sex.
the zone too.
Yeah, there's so many younger birds on the landscape that time of year. But what a resource to be able to hunt in the fall. To me, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I have to give the state a ton of credit. They started this program. They've been very conservative about, if you go back and look, originally it was York County, and then it was York and Cumberland County, and then it was expanded from the New Hampshire border to the Penobscot River, and now the turkey season is open statewide. But they took their time, they did it slowly and carefully. When they got to the fall season, they started with an archery season, archery only, and I could tell you some funny stories there if we have time. Eventually it's expanded it to shotgun. Eventually expanded it to 5 birds. I was a little bit nervous about that
So was I.
because you can kill, turkeys are like deer. You can remove a lot more males because the male can reproduce with multiple females. You start taking females out, and there's a lot of research that shows you can have a distinct and immediate reaction on the population. So I wasn't really necessarily in favor of it, but it's worked out.
Yeah.
There just aren't a lot of people that fall turkey hunting.
I think that's the thing. Die-hard fall turkey hunters. I know you've hunted turkeys in the fall with dogs, which is a trip if you ever get to do that.
Yeah.
Most any dog can do it. We have an old German short hair that she gets out there and busts them up.
Well, a lot of people don't even realize that it's legal to hunt
Correct.
turkeys with dogs in Maine
Yep.
in the fall.
And that is a blast.
Yeah. Well, let's get into something a little bit more controversial here. I'm in the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee all the time as Sam's lobbyist, and I hear a lot of complaints from farmers that turkeys are in their silage, and I've even heard farmers say that we should be able to kill every turkey we see, and some areas they have become a bit of a nuisance, and I want to talk about that a little bit, but I also want to talk about how you cook a turkey, because one of the biggest criticisms I hear is that they're not that great at eating. I haven't found that to be true. It's how you prepare them. But let's talk a little bit about the controversy around too many turkeys on the landscape. And is that a myth, or is it just specific to certain areas?
Before we get to that, I want to add a little history first. 10,000 years ago, we were under a mile of ice. 3,000 years ago, the sea level was 70 feet higher than it is right now. And 1,000 years ago, there were wild turkeys in Maine. And they were here, they lived in, probably more widespread than most people would think. If you're in the woods and you find a stone wall, there's a good chance that there was a turkey there at some point in the history of the state. So it's a reintroduction, it's not an introduction. They were here, we brought them back, and they've flourished.
That's a good point. I didn't
So-
think of it that way.
Now let's start dispelling some of the myths.
I would agree with you. Part of the problem, I understand where the farmers are coming from. I really do. And my response to them is, well, if you have a problem, give us a call.
Yeah.
We'll come and take care of it.
Yeah,
There's some of the problem is all the posted land.
that's right.
And a lot of people won't stop in and say, hey, can I go? Because most of the places that I go, if it's posted, I'll stop in and talk to people, and they'll say, okay, yeah, you can hunt turkeys, but don't come hunt my deer.
Yeah, right.
You know, so a lot of the posted property is part of that.
I'm glad you touched on that because a lot of those farms are posted no hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is frustrating to hear a farmer say that he wants to be able to kill all the turkeys and then he turns around and lets you come hunt them. So we gotta do a little bit better communication with farmers that, you know, we have a partnership, natural partnership there if they wanted to work with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's some limited crop depredation, but so you got to look closer. A lot of the evidence is circumstantial. If you see in the fall, like you said, there's a lot of turkeys around. There's a lot of they form family groups with multiple families, so you might see 30 turkeys out in the blueberry field, going along picking. You think, oh my gosh, they're eating all my blueberries. Well, those young turkeys are primarily eating insects, something with protein. So they're actually doing you a favor. They're going through there and they're pulling all the bugs out, all the ticks, all the worms that are eating your blueberry plants. They're not necessarily eating the berries. Yeah, they eat a few. The other big stinker is acorns. Oh, they're eating all the deer's food. Well, it doesn't belong to anyone until they pick it up and eat it. But they both eat acorns. Deer can feed 24/7. They can feed day, night. Turkeys only feed during the day. If you go in the woods now, right now, things are starting to green up. There's still acorns there left over from last year. And then when we have years when there's a mass crop failure, the deer still make it through just fine. So the turkeys aren't out competing deer for food in any way, shape, or form.
I want to circle back to what you just said and clearly state this. The small birds, the birds that hatched out that year, they eat protein, they eat bugs. And as they get more mature, they move on to plants. And that is a great point, Bob, because most people are thinking maybe they're picking at something in their garden when they're really picking at potato bugs and all the other insects that are in your garden.
And the thing with turkeys is, like this time of year where they're starting to break up, and like you said, Bob, that turkeys are out during the day. And that's what people think there's a gazillion turkeys on the landscape because you're seeing them all the time. Whereas there's just as many deer out there, but they're nocturnal.
Right.
And we see them at daylight and sunset.
Yeah.
And as far as the feed goes, they've been together for years and centuries. And so all those theories that, you know, I would submit that there's more to it than what they're saying. And
well, we have more turkeys right now in Maine than probably we've ever had, even in prehistory. How do you explain that we had a record deer harvest last year?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to wrap this up in a few minutes, but I've watched turkeys interact with deer, and they'll tolerate each other. They feed in the same field. I love to watch the interaction between the turkeys and the deer. The younger ones in particular get more intimidated by, but the older, more mature deer will drive them off, which is pretty interesting.
And the deer don't really seem to bother them.
No.
So they go.
They seem to be just
They
fine.
go on their ways.
And I don't want to be too long-winded, but I'll tell you a story because this is recent. Last year, towards the end of deer season, I went out one afternoon, set up in a stand of oaks, settled down in against a tree on the ground, and got ready to hopefully shoot a deer. Heard a bunch of noise, rustling in the leaves, whatever. Saw some movement, and then here comes the turkeys. And there must have been 24 turkeys. I'm dressed in orange. I'm sitting on the ground. The first one looks, the head goes up. I'm like, oh shoot. Another one, he kind of looks at his buddy and he says, what's that? They came over and they circled around me and they made a ton of noise. Then they went off a little ways and they flew up into the trees and there were branches falling and clucking and yelping, and I'm thinking, oh, there's no way I am going to see a deer tonight. And they finally settled in and stopped flapping their wings and knocking sticks down and dropping whatever it is that they drop when they're done eating. And I looked up and there was a deer. 75 yards away, stepped out from behind the tree, big rack. Okay, good enough. Thank you, turkeys.
Okay.
And I think that's right. I think
That almost like the same scenario happened to me about 10 years ago. I was watching a turkey, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. It was a windy day, watching the turkey. The turkey goes off. I look over, and there's a deer. So it's just
I don't think
they live together. I don't think there's any.
No, they
problem
might
with them.
temporarily, if a big gang comes in, the
Yep.
deer might move off, but as soon as the turkeys leave, the deer will come right back in.
There is one last subject I want to cover, and that is folks putting legislation in to basically allow you to shoot an unlimited amount of turkeys, the same limit as grouse. And I can tell you my personal feelings on just basically treating an animal like it's a nuisance. It disrespects that animal. But when you start saying let's kill them all, or let's get the population to a place where you don't see them anymore, you're treating it like a nuisance and you're degrading that species. In this case, I was a little bit concerned this last session because I was hearing more and more of this let's kill them all type of thing, and to me that's really frustrating. These aren't sportsmen that are saying it, it's people that see them as a nuisance, and all of our wildlife has a place in the landscape and it's important, and I really want to talk about that balance that you strike, having a healthy ability to hunt them, but also not treating them like they're a nuisance.
Well, I testified against that bill that you're talking about, and I just saw it as a knee-jerk reaction by a few people that had farms and thought turkeys were a nuisance. And there's ways, the department has ways of dealing with nuisance turkeys.
Right.
And to put them in the same bag limit as partridge,
Yeah.
I think would have decimated. There's a bunch of different reasons why that would have been horrible. But I think it was just like I said, it was a knee-jerk reaction to a farmer's complaint, and there was no real.
Well,
Let's not forget that Benjamin Franklin wanted the turkey as our national bird.
That's right.
yeah, it's
So
hands down the #1 game bird in North America. Incredibly difficult species to hunt, and you might not think that if you've never hunted them and you see them in the back lawn at the bird feeder, but step into the woods and it's an entirely different creature. But that logic applies to deer too. When the numbers get to a certain level, it goes from being a valued resource to a nuisance. It gets devalued, it gets degraded, and it turns into something other than a game animal.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to see that happen to the wild turkey.
No.
No, we should resist that temptation to label any animal that way. They're all precious resource on the landscape. We got to treat them that way. I want to end the show with you sharing your favorite recipe for cooking turkey. And I'll start with you, Kevin.
I think probably, and I'm gonna probably get a disagreement here, but probably one of my favorite meals from a turkey are the legs. And everybody looks at me like you just looked at me, David. But for years I never kept them, and I'm like, this is wrong. Why am I doing this? Why am I throwing that? I just breast them out, and that'd be the end of it. Which is a perfectly awesome meal. But what I do is take the legs and put them in the crock pot and leave them on the crock pot for all day, and we make like a Tex-Mex out of it,
Nice.
and tacos or whatever, burritos, and it comes out. If you like dark meat on a turkey or a chicken, I think that's one of our favorite, and we usually have those first before we eat the breast.
Wow. That's great to hear. I also do the same thing, but I use them in soup. What do you play about?
First of all, if sometimes people they say, oh, I don't like it, it's too tough, it's whatever, rubbery, it's leathery, it doesn't have much flavor. There's no fat on that bird, so you have to do something. If I cook the breast, sometimes I'll put bacon strips on top and bake it that way, but my all-time favorite is to cube up in little cubes, dredge it in some egg, beat an egg, dredge it in that, roll it in breadcrumbs and flour, and put it in the deep fryer. And have turkey nuggets. And
The only thing I do a little bit different is I roll it in the same egg, and I roll it in Italian breadcrumbs. Sometimes I cut
Ritz crackers.
Ritz crackers, yes.
You want to try something good sometime? Take Humpty Dumpty barbecue potato chips, crush it up real fine, roll it in that.
Okay.
All right. Well, that wraps up this podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is the SAMCAST. Today I was the host, David. Sometimes Bob will be the host in the future, and we'd really like to thank Kevin for joining us.
Thank you.
We really hope that you have a successful turkey season, and hope you saw some value in our show. Thank you.